Hey Mike, how's things, man?
Good talking to you, mate. How are you?
Good. I haven't seen you in 20 fucking years.
It's insane. What the fuck happened here?
Oh man, they were good times back in the day, doing the videos and all kinds of stuff.
It was, man. It was. And I tell you once I arrive in Melbourne here on the 23rd, it's going to be very emotional.
Yeah, I bet. A lot of people may or may not know that this was home for a very long time between Tasmania
It
and
was
Melbourne.
it was home for Mike Tramp for over 10 years. And I was really hoping that I would have been able to break through the Australian music scene and make it my home. I loved Melbourne to death. I loved the Australian way, and everything was absolutely wonderful. I just think that I got there too late, and there weren't really any way of breaking through as an artist at that time. I'm sure you or maybe others could come up with a says, well, what kind of tools were there at that time? It was almost like there were just the places you played, and a lot of places I couldn't play. I didn't really have the name or the background. So eventually I got pulled away, and once I started really getting a lot of work back in Europe and started releasing solo album after solo album. Eventually, I would return to Denmark and started working in Europe and then the US. So, but Australia,
You're
here I
back.
come.
And what's really great is you've actually got your old freak of nature bass player, Jerry Best, along for the ride, which is
Yeah, I
which
mean,
is
yeah,
great.
and you know that, but what you don't know is that on the last Freak of Nature to a Gathering of Freaks, Marcus Nan was the guitar player, and
Yeah.
that's where we established the friendship with Marcus, and Marcus and I, remain friends since '95 when the band broke up, and I think maybe in the back of our mind, we were waiting for this day to come, which then came back into 2019 when we started working together, and he started touring with me first, playing my solo albums, and then we started opening the vault to the White Lion idea.
Yeah. And then you've also got Brent on drums. So Brent, I've worked with his band Shadow and the Thrill with Tony from Great White. So it's a big
Well, there
old
you go. You
reunion.
know more than I do.
Yeah. So he's a great drummer. He's played with people like Ed Kowalczyk from Live. Very,
True.
very great drummer that's gonna, from the
Yeah.
videos I've seen, brings a really great flavor to those songs.
Exactly. Well, I mean, it's one of those things that this late in our life, we're not putting an '80s band back together. We're a band of musicians,
Yep.
players that really want to stand behind the songs and then let the songs be in the driver, and sort of less flash that where almost the music competed with the show and the look in the '80s. Now
Yep.
we're down to for the punters to come out and enjoy beer and hear in the band. This is for the music.
Yeah, it's a very emotional change to the music from the 80s, the way that you're doing the songs now. It's almost
Yeah.
like probably what it would have been like for you and Vito to sit with acoustic guitars on a couch and write them.
Yeah, no, I mean, but this hindsight is 2020. You know, if you could do something over again, how would you do it? Well, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
I'm doing it first of all with the knowledge of what I once did, and now getting a chance to do it again. So going in and performing these songs as as a mature, grounded person, being able to sort of just hold back a little when I'm singing them, and making, it's just things that I mean, I'm not dissing, my old recordings. But when I'm looking at them and seeing where I was at that time, I was very young in my mind and kind of maybe a little too gung ho,
Hmm.
but it would have been possible for me to look to slow that down because the energy of the '80s were just unstoppable, and I couldn't just say, well, I'm going to take it easy. It wouldn't have worked.
And that's the thing. In the 80s, everybody had to look a certain way. Everyone then copied the sound, the look, the lights, the pyro. Whereas now, Mike Tramp is Mike Tramp. Even
No, you're right on. I mean, looking back now from this angle, looking back, yes, it was one band copying the other. I of course, since Australia is such a big surfer nation, I once heard a surfer talking about the 12 waves of once the big one comes, then the next 12 is just slow down, and then it becomes ripple, and then it starts over again. And so if you look sort of backwards, that the first big waves were the original bands of the 80s, and after that everything just became a smaller version of what the big one was.
Yeah.
And it lost its momentum, and it lost its originality. And then how many blonde lead singers, how many people in it just lost. And I don't have a right, but the thing is that when you pick up the last records for the last bands that we've forgotten the names of, you do hear that it's just a diluted version of what was then. And now as you get to do it, and as people bring the bands back, you also get to see what was a strong song. And White Lion stands very much by themselves with the songs that were we maybe didn't know it as much when it all happened, but now when you listen between different bands, you will hear that the band had its own sound, and the lyrics was from a different point of view. And so that's nice when I now have to go up and sing the songs that I'm not the one who put the X in sex.
Sorry, Paul. But it's true. And if people really want a history lesson, I actually, before the show, great, listen to White Line and listen to your new versions, but listen to some of the solo albums. So for me, a song off your solo album, like Falling Down, you've got two versions. You've got Songs I Left Behind version, which is that rocky, almost a tip of the hat to White Line. And then you go the proper studio version, which is the singer-songwriter, laid back storyteller version, which is what you're doing now. You're doing the storyteller version of White Line.
I mean, this is one of the things that, I haven't really done interviews to Australia for a very, very long time. So I'm extremely excited about that, but I'm truly grateful that you can go that deep in and mention, two versions of a song that and things like that. So we actually are able to talk about it, of the process of when I wrote Falling Down. Originally, it was almost in the moment where there was a little lingering of going to do a revisit of White Lion.
Yeah.
Then that sort of got closed down. So when I brought it back up and started working on the song the second time around, and then brought it back down to where I wanted it to do, and that song now completely represents myself, and I'm looking forward to get a chance to be able to go out at some time or another to do a tour of the solo albums. I know it's going to be a hard fight because people want to add, Mike Tramp from White Line, but obviously you know better than anyone that the solo set would have nothing to do with White Lion.
No, and the thing is, you've always represented, you may put one or two songs in, even back in the day you did. You knew you had to, but you knew that your own material stood on its own feet. You were confident in yourself as a songwriter, which is what's great about what you're doing now with this band, is you're confident about the songs. You don't care. You go up in jeans and a t-shirt, put the Telecaster on, and it's go time.
Yeah. I mean, that is the thing, is that you mentioned Freak of Nature, but it almost wasn't until I closed down White Lion that I realized that my future and what I needed to do was stand my ground and just be me, don't be anybody else. Of course, Freak of Nature became a hard rock band, and we came out right in the middle as grunge and alternative was exploding. We came out there with our own love for 70s rock and roll, UFO, Thin Lizzy, Rainbow, wanting to add that. But once Freak of Nature ended, and I says, okay, now I have had 3 bands. Now it's just about being Mike Tramp when he's by himself. And I didn't have to go into the closet and look for how I was going to be, because I was just me.
Yep.
And then I picked, and I sat down with the acoustic guitar, or I sat down with the Telecaster. And one of the first songs I wrote was Have You Ever? And that was instantly just saying, well, this is who you are when you are by yourself. And that's all you need to do. And every solo album has just been about that. Never trying to be anybody else but me.
Yep. I was just going to say one thing about Freak of Nature. I hate the fact that band was lumped in with the grunge bands, because to me, you said Thin Lizzy. It's like a modern day version of Thin Lizzy and Deep Purple.
Yeah. No. Of course we carried it on, and it's very hard to live with that. Again, I say I had to close down the band, because this is kind of like the story has never been told. But when you have something that is that great, and you see it very early on fraying at the edges for unknown reasons, I wanted to keep those phenomenal memories and those phenomenal 2 albums. And I wasn't going to start replacing members after members, because those 2 albums are the 5 of us.
Yeah.
It cannot be changed. So I said, I rather preserve this like a mummy.
Yeah.
Okay. And always be able to see it as it in its purity.
Yeah. People need to track down the box set. That's one of my favorite things, is that box set. It's so good.
Yeah.
Now, thinking about your time when you were here for a decade, what was the music scene like for you as a spectator, more than, because you weren't playing a lot when you were living here? What was it like being a spectator and watching Australian music?
Well, I mean, first of all, coming to Australia, first a couple of years in Tasmania, and then coming up to Melbourne and living in Melbourne. And of course, like many others, having the knowledge that this is where AC/DC came from. This is where Rose Tattoo came from. This is where John Farnham was. This is where, Midnight Oil, great artist, Billy Thorpe. I mean, the musical history of Australia. And picking up the remains of what that scene once was, just because most of it was gone, but I could feel it in some of the venues that I played, that there still was a little bit of the old dust from when Bon Scott would have been there, when the Aztecs would have been there, all those kind of things. And that was extremely thrilling for me to know that now I actually understood the lyrics of Bon Scott. Singing Highway to Hell or She's Got the Jack, being in Europe, they were just lyrics to a rock song. But coming to Australia and seeing tradesmen, in the blondies and the high-waisted jeans and the singlet, I started understanding the point behind AC/DC. Yep. Because to me, it was, of course, one of the greatest rock band and one of my overall favorites. But being now from where they came from and seeing the lifestyle of people, why that band became like that is, and why the band kept their feet on the ground, and how Malcolm and Angus used to walk out looking like like the school kids on the way to school, and Malcolm just being the tradesman. It all came home to me. Now, of course, then I also saw that there was a new wave of bands that little by little were trying to find their ground in Australia. Yeah. But I also noticed that there were a limit to where they could go. It's almost like they just remained there, but they were never going to be able to be any more than just a big club band that would pack a club.
Yeah.
And then of course there's me trying to break through and seeing, okay, I was only going to be able to do what I did. And it's sadly because it was a phenomenal time. I loved Melbourne, and I loved the Australian way, the Australian humor. Everything was great.
If anyone saw you when you were living here and you played, the one thing about the gigs is you actually adopted one great thing from Australia. You knew how to took the piss out of yourself. You were fantastic at it. I remember we were sitting in Sydney, and it was 10 minutes before you went on, and they played Don't Want to Say Good Night over the PA, and you looked at me and you were like, are they trying to give me a hint? And then you went out and busted into your own song. It was great.
No, I mean, no, it's just it is one of those things, is that Australia allowed that.
Yep.
Allow that, and it's great to constantly be on that edge of taking the piss out, but delivering 100% class rock and roll.
Yep.
So going out on stage, especially in Sydney and Melbourne, and connecting with some faces that I know, and of course, without patting myself too much on the back, it is a bit of a homecoming for me.
Yeah.
And I want the audience to know that.
I love the fact that while I've moved up to Brisbane, this actually, I think it's your first time, isn't it, actually playing in Brisbane?
Yeah, it is. It is.
That's exciting for me that I've moved up.
Yeah, I'm
here
looking forward to see.
Here.
I'm looking forward to have a bevy with you after the show.
Yeah, awesome, man. So once you're done in Australia, when do we put White Lion to bed again and go back to Tramp Solo?
Just as I thought I was out, they pulled me back in.
Yeah.
Both are going to exist.
Okay. Yep.
At the same time. There is volume 3 on the way later this year. Mm-hmm. The end of the trilogy of the re-recording and refurbished version of White Lion, where we're basically already finished recorded. We still need to do a few more things, but that album will be out August, September.
Okay.
Closing that down. The future will possibly also hold a new My Tramp's White Lion original material, a new hard rock album, which, without saying too much, because no songs have been written, I would not be surprised that we would lean up against some of our heroes from the 70s.
Okay, yeah.
Actually, we're already doing that on volume 3. You will hear small traces of how we tip our hat to our heroes, even how we tip our hat to our heroes with the White Lion songs and add a bit of them. I already have the next My Tramp Solo album close to done in my studio. It's really just a matter of how to release them, this thing. And I think some of these albums will be released much more with the fans in mind, that it'll be specific for the fans. It's not something you just go out and look for in the stores. The fans will know it because there's only such a big market.
Have you thought about, being that Europe is such a big stronghold for you, maybe pairing with an orchestra and doing a White Lion orchestrated show unplugged?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to do that anywhere, but the thing is, it's just, it has to have its market.
Yeah.
A promoter has to come and say, last year I did this thing called Rock Meets Classic.
Yeah.
Where I together with a couple of Uriah Heep, Joey Tempest from Europe, Maggie Riley, and a couple of other artists did this where I performed five White Lion songs with a big classical orchestra, and it was and a rock band. It was great to do. So all those possibilities are there for the future, in the same way as I'm also very, very slowly but very conscious preparing for once I'm in the 70s and I'll have to be sort of leaning up against the piano and singing the songs in a new way, but the music will go on.
Yeah.
And I like that the music sort of go on both with where the world is, and we're not trying to bring something out and pretend we're 30 years ago. We want today to have an influence, even though we're playing classic rock. There has to be something. And when I walk out on stage, you will see that I'm here today.
So I've got to ask you, man, do you still listen to Southbound before you go on stage?
I never put Thin Lizzy away.
Perfect. All right, man. I'll let you go.
You got it, mate. I'm looking forward to see you.
I'll be with camera in hand, as always.
Cheers, mate. All the best.
You, mate.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.